Welcome to Escape the Noise, a podcast about hiking, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Joe Vogel, your host. We're coming to you from the Silicon Slopes studio in downtown Provo, Utah. Our guest this week, Jefferson Chase, a prominent member of the local trail running community and peak bagger extraordinaire. Jefferson grew up in Utah Valley and has a contagious passion for the Wasatch Mountains, especially Mount Timpanogos. While he has always loved the outdoors, it was a challenging time in his life 5 years ago that triggered a new obsession with hiking and trail running. Aspects of your story that I'm just eager to kind of learn more about. But you mentioned that you've kind of always been into the outdoors and you know, something that you grew up with, but that I think you said about 5 years ago is when you kind of really became, you know, more intense about it.
Yes. Yeah. So went through a pretty hard time, pretty big shift in my life personally and with my family. And I needed more peace. I needed something more in life to help me get through that, the struggles that I was going through, the emotions that I was feeling. And I turned to hiking. I remember really when I got into hiking was my first one was Kive Peak. And I went up there. It was, challenging for sure because I hadn't been doing elevation a lot. And I just got to the top and I was just like, this is incredible. Like, look at everything that you can see from up there. And I think the kind of rolls into the podcast name, like Escape the Noise. Up there, it's just you and just beauty and peace and tranquility. And so after that hike, I knew that was something that I needed in my life on a regular basis. And that's when I really started, okay, now I've always loved Timpanogos. And so I'm like, that is something that I'm going to challenge myself next. So that was the next one I did was Timpanogos and summiting Timp.
And that's a big difference, right?
It is.
In terms of length and time and all that.
Yeah, so I was already in shape, again, because I had done outdoor activities, snowboarding and rock climbing and canyoneering, marathons. I've always been active, but I never experienced what you feel when you're on top of a mountain.
Yeah.
Or when you're walking on those trails, when you're covered in trees.
Yeah.
When it's just silent or there's birds or you hear rustling in the brush or, in the oak brush and stuff. And there's just something about it that is just so, it's undescribable. It's just great.
Now, I know you're a big trail runner now. Mm-hmm. So when did that enter the picture? Like, did you hike at first and then kind of transition into trail running, or was that always part of it?
Yeah, no, it's transitioned. So I continued to do some hikes and I had never really used Strava before. And so after doing some hikes, I realized that I wanted to start tracking, my distance, my elevation, and just the routes that I was doing. And so I created a Strava account. And then in the winter of 2021, I met a really good buddy of mine, Tyler, at a group run with Runner's Corner in Orem. And we were doing a group run on trails. That's the first time I had actually really done trail running. There were hikers and some slower, runners as well. Yeah. And so when I ran with that group, we were only doing, I think, 8 miles that day. And a few of us were feeling good enough that we're like, hey, the regular group, you guys, they're going to split off and do the planned route. Right. But then Tyler and another couple of buddies were like, do you want to keep going? And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. I want to keep going. And so that was like the winter of 2021 was when I really caught on to, okay, trail running you're still hiking, right? I mean, that when we do races, when we are exploring, adventuring, we're still hiking, 40% of the time, maybe 60% of the time. And so but it was a mix of running, which I already loved doing, with, bringing best of both worlds. And I was like, this is something that I'm going to be into. And so, so that was how I got into trail running, and just the culture and the people that you meet hiking and trail running is like no other. It's so different from marathons. It's so different from triathlons. It's so different from maybe, adult city league sports and that sort of a thing. It's the community inside of hiking and trail running they're just amazing people.
I picked up on that too. Yeah, it's a different crowd, right? It's like good energy.
Yes.
I mean, I'm kind of interested to talk about this too, because what's your approach when you're trail running? Do you feel competitive, like even with yourself? Like, are you trying to beat records, or are you just more like, being present, or does it depend on, hike to hike? Like how are you approaching it?
Yeah. And that's a great question. I don't ever, unless I'm doing a race, I'm competing for myself.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I don't have these accolades of amazing, times in my races that I've done. It's honestly just for me. And then outside of that, it's doing it with other people, with connecting with other people. And that's why trail hiking and trail running is so gratifying, because there's times when you're trail running where you're hiking, and that's when you can really create create relationships, strengthen relationships. There's so many times where you get into such deep conversations, and you just come back to the trail physically exhausted, but you're also emotionally exhausted and mentally exhausted but also uplifted, I guess, because of all the things that you've talked about. So there's so many emotions there, and that's why that's the motivation for me. It's not about time. It's not about how fast I can do things. It's about challenging yourself to summit, to reach a certain height or a certain distance, and then the benefit of that is doing it with people, with friends and people that you meet on the trails.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it.
Yeah. And so when you're out there, right, when you're running, right, what does it feel like? What's the experience? Is it like, are you talking to people? Like, if you're going with other people, you're talking as you're running?
And it's different than road running, because you are at a slower pace. Yeah. And so you do hold conversations that way. But the feeling is again, it's just a different energy.
Yeah.
It's feeling, I like to do this thing where every few hundred yards, I will touch a tree, or there's 3 rocks on the Timpanogos trail that I love to touch certain rocks and just connect with the trail.
Yeah.
And so that energy is, you can feel it.
Yeah.
And that's something that you don't get in other places.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. You grew up in Utah?
Grew up mostly in Utah. I'm born and raised in California, in the Bay Area.
Okay.
But I moved here when I was 14, so I really consider myself a Utah boy than California.
When you were there, did you do any kind of hiking or?
We did a little bit, yeah. There's an area called Brioni Park, and there are some Yosemite. We would go there once a year as a family. But I was so young that I don't really remember that.
Yeah.
So that's really why I call the Utah mountains home.
Yeah, and I can tell that, Utah means a lot to you, right? Sometimes people that are here and just kind of grow up here, I found just almost like it's just kind of here, right? Like it's almost just like you take it for granted, right?
Yes.
For me personally, like I think I always thought it was beautiful, but I think it really was leaving for an extended period of time, being on the East Coast, that helped me to kind of see it in a fresh way, right? But I'm kind of curious just how and why you think that is the case, that you just, like, when you moved here to Utah, that you always just kind of appreciated it.
Yeah, so it really came down to the people that you get to enjoy it with. I know I could probably keep going back to that, but I think that's value that we can all use in our lives, especially with how busy we get and how much stress and how much distraction there is in our lives. That's what gravitated me towards the mountains, was just being able to connect at a different level with people, and then connecting with Mother Nature, with all of this that God created. And I think I am lucky that I didn't grow up here, as far as being born and raised, because you're exactly right. So many people take advantage, or don't take advantage, I say, of the mountains that are literally, we're right here in downtown Provo. We have Kive Peak that's literally 12 minutes away. Right. You could start one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful peaks.
I love that hike
in Utah.
Yeah,
and so it's something that's so available to everyone, and I love that part of it as well.
Yeah, it is unique. Utah's unique in that the mountains are just right there,
yes. Yeah.
Right? Even like Denver, other places, like you're not that close, right? So it is a unique area, specifically for hiking and people that want to get out in the canyons and mountains.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you can just on the spot, like what's one of your best adventures? Like what's one of your best hiking stories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that question. Probably last year was a lot of fun. I owe a lot of credit to some of my best friends who have supported me, encouraged me. There's my buddy Bill and my buddy Craig and my buddy Andy and Tyler. These are guys that are huge into hiking and trail running, that are way bigger than I am. They're amazing, and I look up to them. And we have done some incredible adventures. Last year, we did what was called the ART, and it's the Alpine Ridge Trail. And so you start in American Fork Canyon. Instead of going to the right over by Timpanogos, you head to the left and do Box Elder. So we did South Box Elder Peak, and then Box Elder, and then White Pine, and then went over to Pfeifferhorn. We were supposed to do a couple of other ones, but we ended up not being able to complete the whole route. But it was just peak after peak after peak. And it was just so, every view, when you get to the peak, every view is just stunning. And it's, you literally are standing up there and you're just like, I wish everybody could experience this. I wish everybody could see how beautiful this is and how you feel when you're at the top. So that was a super fun adventure. One of my top adventures for sure.
How long did that one take?
That one took us 6 hours of moving time.
Yeah.
I think it was right around 8,000 feet of elevation, and we did like 17, almost 18 miles.
Okay.
So that was a really fun one. And then we also did another one, which was going straight up Cascade and heading all the way down to Spanish Fork Peak.
Oh, nice.
So that was a bigger day. That was like 12,000 feet of elevation gain. And that was unique because there was some very sketchy like rock climbing and scrambling where I took some video of it, and I was scared to show my buddy Tyler, who I was doing it with. I'm like, this is how close you were to falling, 30, 40 feet down to these rocks. But it was again, just the excitement and the challenge just made that day just amazing. When you're done, you're exhausted, but you're like, and you get to look up. When you're in the valley, you get to look up at the mountains and just be like, I've been there and I went all the way across.
That is fun, right?
And it's, like
when I took my son up to Mount Timpanogos, now every time we drive, he's like, wow, I was all the way up there.
Yeah. And how fun is that, you know?
That's awesome.
So those were just two of the highlights of my last year. And then, and of course, I'm going to have to say Timp, because the times that I summited Timp last year, it just has a special place for me. When I was going through that difficult time in my life, that was one of the most spiritual experience of just sitting up there next to the shack and just taking it all in and just feeling everything and then just letting it go. And I knew that being at that altitude, it would for some reason, my mentality was it's going to dissipate faster And it was sucking all the negative out of me. And I was just feeling just so peaceful.
That part of it was a revelation to me too, it's just that, there's the physical act of hiking, right? Which feels good, because you're challenging yourself, you're pushing yourself.
Yeah.
But there is, I think, this very unique experience when you get up high, right? And you're far away from everything and you've been out for a while, that it really can create these like amazing spiritual experiences.
Yes, it's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what will bring if people want to get into it, if they're not into it yet, anybody who gets introduced to your company and has that desire, they'll feel that. I mean, that's something that will be an experience that they'll get to have.
And it's perspective that you bring back with you, right? Because
absolutely.
We, I think, are just caught up down here,
Yeah.
right? In life, right? And all the distractions and all the noise, but there is a kind of clarity, right, that you gain up there. It's very mythical, right? Like it's kind of like this, hero's journey, kind of like you go out, do something really hard, bring something back.
Yes.
Right? It's almost like an archetypal journey.
Yes, right? That's a great way to describe it.
You mentioned some sketchy parts of your hike. It was from Cascade, right?
Yeah.
So, but have you had any kind of like scary moments that whether weather or like wildlife or something that
yeah. And I was thinking about that as I was kind of looking forward to this podcast. I was thinking about the time this one time I summited Timp, and it was past the meadow, just right below where you start to traverse up to the saddle. And there's some rocky areas. I had to pee. And so I stepped off the trail and started taking care of business. Yeah. And all of a sudden, not more than 10 feet away, what I thought was like just a huge, I don't know. I didn't realize it was a badger, but it popped out and it started looking at me. And I'm in the middle of using the bathroom, and I'm like, and the claws on its feet were just huge. They looked like 3-4 inches long. And he starts approaching me, and I'm like, and I've seen moose, and I've seen, I've seen other animals. I've jumped over rattlesnakes and not even known until somebody mentioned it that, as you're running. And, but that badger, and so I hurried and finished and just kind of slowly started stepping away. And he was almost like challenging me and getting closer and closer. Of course, I ended up getting my phone out and I started videoing it. And I'm
going to have to see this footage.
Yeah,
now.
I'll show it to you. And then I got closer and just to see really how big it was, and didn't realize that it was a badger. And then it didn't dawn on me until I was sharing it with a couple of friends. They're saying, yeah, I had forgotten that badgers are aggressive and they don't mess around.
Is that the only time you've seen one up there?
Yeah, I didn't.
Because I've never seen one up there.
That's the only time I've seen a badger in Utah. Yeah.
Are there rattlesnakes up Timpanogos?
I don't think so. I think the altitude, okay. I've never seen them.
I see them in Rock Canyon.
Yeah. Rock Canyon for sure. A lot of these other, Battle Creek, Grove Creek, all these other trailheads, there's definitely rattlesnakes. I don't know anybody that's ever been bitten, and I'm in a pretty big community of hikers and trail runners, so nobody ever needs to really worry about that, but be aware of it. But yeah, that's the first time I've seen a badger, and of course the goats. The goats. I've got my goat shirt on underneath this in case I got too hot. But the goats are they're majestic. Yeah. And again, just being how comfortable they are with humans, and for the most part, they're not too scared of us, and so you can get fairly close without interrupting their life and not threatening them.
Right.
And it's just, the goats just inspire me every single time.
It's a cool experience, right? It always kind of feels like when you see them, you're kind of at a certain point in the hike. And,
yes.
I think for everybody that hikes Timpanogos, that's like one of the special parts of it.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jefferson. We'll continue the discussion on our next episode, including learning some of Jefferson's favorite local trails and things he recommends for people just getting started with trail running or hiking. Thanks again to Jefferson for joining us. You can follow his adventures on Instagram at Chase Flyboy. Escape the Noise is produced by Timpanogos Hiking Co. I'm your host, Joe Vogel. A big thank you to Kai Bradford for his assistance with scheduling and production, to the Wildfires for our intro music, and to Silicon Slopes and Weston Tanner for hosting us and helping us make it all happen. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again next episode.